First off, I should probably note that it might be some time before the next Animorphs video. Not because of my usual problems in getting these videos up, but because I'm planning on posting the entire David trilogy in one go, so expect a rather big shebang when that goes up. In the meantime, I'll try to catch up on some of these requested reviews. Now, Oregon Trail 2, a PC game produced by MECC in 1996. That might seem like an odd request if you don't know me. My brother does know me, and he requested this review probably from our shared nostalgic feelings towards it. And despite whatever conclusion I may come up with in this review, this is indeed a nostalgic game for me. When we updated our computer systems from an ancient DOS running machine from the days of floppy disks, when they were actually floppy, this was one of the first games we got, along with Sonic CD and Comic Zone. As you can imagine, this game was the runt of that litter, but it did get a serious amount of play among me and my siblings. One thing it had over other games was its presentation. As far as I know, Oregon Trail 2 is the only game to come in a goddamn wooden box the size of a dictionary. Imagine your dad coming home with 3 new games. 2 in standard jewel cases, and the other inside something that should be holding antique spoons. I mean, it was just a wooden box. But did Mario come in a wooden box? Did Zelda come in a wooden box? Nay, say I, nay. The main reason for the box was to hold the strategy guide that came with the game, along with a certificate of authenticity, in case the cops came into my house and demanded to prove my ownership of Oregon Trail 2. Again, few games at the time bothered with this level of presentation. Sure, Killzone 3 comes with a gas mask, and God of War comes with I think it was a disemboweled kitten, but you just didn't see this back then. As for the game itself, it's by and large a facelift of the original Oregon Trail from, 1971. I guess someone looked at the game 20 years down the line and said, "Hey, graphics have upgraded rather considerably. I'm sure we can make a version of this game where your ox-driven wagon isn't traversing through what looks like a black hole." Instead of the limited color palettes and images made in the caveman versions of MS Paint, the game now relishes in wood grains and old paper and leather. The locations are detailed, the characters presented as still photos of real people in period clothes, the landscape a mixture of rendered graphics and photographs. Instead of beeps and boops, the soundtrack is now fiddles and banjos, though the limited soundtrack does get rather old rather quickly. All the dialogue is voice acted, ranging from stiff as a board readings to over-the-top camp. There are also sound effects to flesh things out. While the game's presentation may have given the whole thing a warp jump, the actual gameplay is actually nearly identical to the 1971 original. It's essentially a history simulator, whereupon you lead your covered wagon from east to the west in the 19th century. You buy your supplies and head out into the wilderness. As you progress west, you come across settlements, travelers, and natural events, making a choose-your-own-adventure style decision in how to deal with them. Sometimes the people in your party get sick, and sometimes they die. Maybe due to poor planning, insufficient supplies, and bad decisions, and sometimes from fluke chance. The primary idea behind Oregon Trail series is to put the hardships of the early travelers on display and have you share in that hardship. And that's where the physical and sound upgrades in this second version actually backfire, because the mood is consistently cheerful and upbeat, even as winter falls on your party and disease and hunger pick off your family one by one. A scream pops up informing you that your son passed away from cholera. We cut to an image of people hovering over a gravesite. But the soundtrack keeps on with its repetitive "she'll be coming around the mountain" style banjo dinglings. There are no actual scary images in the game either. If a character is sick, you don't see an image of yellowed flesh or spots or whatever. You see a kid blowing his nose. If a character is gravely hurt, you don't see a broken and mangled limb, you see a guy recovering under a blanket. Surely, I'm not saying turn this into a gore fest, but if the object was to educate, then most kids will learn that the people traveling the trail to Oregon got a lot of runny noses. I think some of this might have had to do with MECC getting kicked in the balls back in 1993 over a game called Freedom, an Oregon Trail type game about the Underground Railroad. Because people can't stand the fact that history kinda sucked, parents got offended and actually sued a school who had the game on its computer, which resulted in the game getting pulled completely from the market. Now, I've run Freedom on an emulator, and it is an uncomfortable game, largely because it's honest about the attitudes during the time of black slavery. If MECC got their asses handed to them for presenting history in a realistic fashion, you could imagine they might get a bit jumpy about a game where a 6-year-old could potentially get killed by fallen rocks. To its credit, one thing this version of the game does is let you start your journey anytime within a 20-year time period, and the maps you use and the places you visit will be accurate to that time frame. So, hey, at least that part's properly educational. The game is largely that of decision making. The only real other element to it is the hunting segments, where you wait as rabbits, ducks, deer, and buffalo get in the range of your gun. How much fun you have with it depends on how much fun you have with any other hunting simulator. And yeah, those go over really big. Subjectively, going back to Oregon Trail 2 was a nice trip down memory lane, but taking the game on its own merits, it's nothing ground-shaking. It's got a nice presentation that ultimately conflicts with the atmosphere the game should be providing, and the gameplay itself is very basic and not all that exciting. Honestly, the original Oregon Trail didn't do much for me either. Besides allow me to talk down to young whippersnappers and tell them about the days when I used to use an Apple II. I haven't checked out the newer editions of the game. Apparently there's a version out on Facebook now. So I can't really say how much it's been improved since then. The Oregon Trail 2 game disc is pretty easy to find used online, though the version with the wooden case is a bit harder, but not impossible to find. I've managed to get the game to run on Windows 7, which is pretty considerable considering the game was originally designed for Windows 3.1. So I imagine you shouldn't have any trouble playing it if you're interested.